but it should be more about talking about how to get planning right. So I hope you see the screen. So it's really about, like there is a lot of decisions that are taken about what we have to build in the next years, where we're going to invest money, and so on. And especially in the long-term range, what I've seen in many places, but especially in Canada and in some places in North America, is that there are a lot of multi-billion projects that are like dropped like that at political will, and sometimes they die because of political fortunes changing, and that's something that happens quite often. And there is not so much consistency in how decisions are taken and how like we really assess what is really useful or not, leaving the fact that politics has to decide at a certain point. But at least the planning process should be the process where decisions are made clear and trade-offs are made clear too. So the million-dollar question is always like when we start is, can the better transit planning process foster better transit decision making? So at least politics, because the role of politics should be at least making decision making. What I can say is that really sometimes changing the way you do planning within an overall reform of how you do or you treat transit, it's really important to have better outcomes. So the introduction lately in Italy of what's called like sustainable urban mobility plans as the main tool that city have to prepare like to devise their planning approach has been really a game changer in the way things have improved. And this from a country that normally is not exactly a model of good governance nor politics, with very different levels at local levels. But like it's not exactly Scandinavia where you think everything will go well, regardless of what they do. Um, so what is a sustainable mobility, urban mobility plan? So it's not an Italian invention. As many things that happens in Europe in general, they come out from um, which kind of soft policies that are diffused by the European Union that don't get much attention because they are very niche things, but they are actually the best way Europe has improved the way member states are doing stuff and knowledge is shared on a technical and policy making level. So it's a medium term, normally 10, 15 years strategic plan. So strategic plan means that it's something that you have to approach in a very more like holistic approach all the aspect of urban mobility. So it's not just transit, it's not just road building, it's not just logistic, because it's urban mobility for goods and people. There's all the logistic part. It's very important in our age of delivery and stuff like that. And it's part of the EU 2020 strategy for more sustainable mobility and inclusive growth. All those kind of things the European Union loves to do. And it's something that's been introduced in different ways in most European countries, with differences because every country do its own flavor of this kind of directives, EU directives. So as I say, it's a strategic planning, so it's not this kind of thing you see sometimes as visions or something like that that are still useful exercise in a way to like imagination, like gathering imagination and brainstorming at the beginning, but it's a strategy. So there should be a goal. So normally you have to have like in 10, 15 years, what do we want our mobility system in our city to looks like? Okay, there is a desired end state at the end, and then there should be like a number of achievable goals that should be much more detailed, like broad goals and much more detailed goals. And then the most important thing is not just, oh, it should be fantastic. We want to have this inclusive and everybody will be happy and congestion will be resolved and so on. No, it should be realistic in the sense that it is an exercise that where trade-offs, because there is nothing, there is always a trade-off in decision, are made explicit through the process, through the documents production, through the process of finding them and weighing it. I mean, how much? If we do this we lose that. If we do this, it will cost more, or we get more benefit. Or if we do this, it will cost way too more, and the benefits are not worth it, for example. So these two words are the fundamental parts of how this plan should work. So because there is no or very little win-win, because if you say everybody's winning, most of the time it's because the public treasury is losing and future generations through debt and all this stuff. So I'm not like an austerity person, not at all. But I mean, wisely spending money is important. And it's important to define goals, for example, and goals can be very broad, like we want to increase ridership at peak, do want to reduce greenhouse gases emission linked to transportation. That are a big issue and a very huge problem we have to tackle in our age. We want to reduce accidents, for example, safety, vision zero, all of this kind of stuff. We want to provide all day based service as a form of like accessibility, general and universal accessibility. We want to extend coverage to some underserved areas of category of peoples. So it's important for like taking the right decision, knowing that resources are limited and will always be. Okay, that these benefits are weighed towards cost. So how much do we get of every spending of public money we're going to spend in those projects, actions, and policies? Because I'm not just talking about projects of building concrete, like new transit lines, new transit infrastructures, but also how much service are we going to fund in the future? How are we going to have policies like congestion charge? So mobility plans take into account all that, like a new parking policy, a new low traffic zone, and so on. So, and how do you do? Normally, you do different scenarios to compare these policies or a combination of those policies in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. So, how much do I spend in resources, every kind of resources, not just economic one, to get this uh, results, and how effective are my policies in getting the results I want to get, or at least I say. So normally these kind of things start from very broad goals, but have to be translated to specific measurable objectives. So I will take some example from Italian plans and also like trying to apply to some context. So for example, this is from Bologna's mobility plan that has very broad goals that are linked to international agenda and problems like climate protection, air quality, safety like vision zero things, accessibility, quality of life, and so on. But then they are translated in goes into model share, for example. We want to have from 57 to 41% of trips that are done by car and increasing other modes. How many million of miles traveled by car we want to reduce or want to increase for transit and other modes? How much do we want the average reduction in private vehicle trips by 12%? Okay, these are goals that can be measured through the implementation of the plan every 3 4 years. So you can say, okay, are we going in the right direction with what we are planning? Are we really going to achieve this goal that we gave ourselves? So how do we get this? I mean, I will be a bit technical, but I think it's very important because it's if you don't get things right, you probably end up with wrong results. So, for example, let's say that you want to provide service. Normally, those plans are done on a metropolitan area, metro area level, but they can be done on a more like limited area with more limited scope. For example, let's say that the eastern part of the island is actually the north of Montreal. There are a lot of projects going on now, but mostly our projects dropped because our projects have been like political promises for a long time. Doesn't mean that they are useless. It means that there is less coordination between, for example, the blue line extension and the red arrow MLS project. So normally, what you should do first, you should know how mobility works in your region, and there's no way around what's the fundamental tool of this, that is the origin destination service. For example, Montreal is a city that is getting it right. So it's been done like regular every 5 years. Origin destination surveys very, like the sampling is under 7,000 person in 74,000 households that are interviewed. So and then these results are generalized to the whole population. But it's very costly activity, but it's very necessary necessary that it is carried out regularly, so you know where people go, so you know all the destination, people coming from here to here, knowing what time of the day, what mode they choose, what are their social demographic profile, and so on. So you have these origin destination matrices, more or less detailed, and what's called OD zoning. This is not the zoning you're thinking about. But then these are the origin destination matrices is what is used to create traffic models. So that take into account not just road traffic, but all trips or modes. So it's just for everything is a bit more difficult to do this for bikes and pedestrian, but there are ways to do around it. And mostly these should be traffic models that are maintained and regularly updated by regional planning agencies. This is the case in Montreal with the Agence Régionale de Transport Métropolitain, but it should be, I think, the case for with MPOs in the United States. And in Italy, mostly is regional planning agencies. So regional means regions, not that maintains this because it's an expensive thing. So they can be used by local authorities, local transit agencies for their own need, but with the expertise concentrated in a larger body that can take care of this. Um, then you have to assess all the other problems. Like, okay, I know where people are going now, but I want to know are there areas that are underserved by transit? You know, where trip lengths are much bigger than in other places. Are there disadvantages population that lack mobility options beside the private bike? Are there unmet mobility needs for particular groups, for example, that our society tend to forget very often? Children, high schoolers, non-drivers, people with disabilities, other areas that are more prone to accidents, mapping out where, who is involved, who are the victim, what time of the day, you know, like to know how we can intervene on that. For example, how is pollution generated from a car and other modes affecting people like noise, air, pollution. So when you do this and you have a general idea, normally what you should do is do what I mean, we can call it sensible cryoning. It means that you have to start to decide I mean, the planning agency and the planning body and the group of people working on mobility plans, plausible scenarios. Like say, not just saying, okay, should we use maglev in this place or use like every kind of option? No, like, you know, there are more or less, there's been a selection of things that works and or don't work. So we know more or less what can be done. And okay, let's say that we can do this with this cost, or we can build this new project, or we can improve the existing network, or we can improve service. So both new projects or working on the surface network, on the underground network, or the rail, and so on. Because and what we have to factor in is not just new projects, but all the policy that have an effect on mobility behaviors. Like new road projects should be factored in because they have a negative effect. So if you're building a mass transit and widening a street on the same OD pair, you're probably like negating the effect of the other one. Are you introducing road pricing, parking policy, parking costs, etc.? Then here in PUMS is where you decide the mode and the general alignment for new projects. Because mode, I mean, generally, broadly talking, is not just the technology, but the quality of the right of way. So, you know, how much is grade separated or exclusive is important because it defines the three main, let's say, characteristics that you can feed into the model and the traffic model to uh, forecast the behavior of users, that is average speed, frequency, and capacity that can be factored in. So, and then in the cost benefit analysis, then, sorry, the general alignment, because that's what about. Like you want people to go from here and here, and you want to hit places that generate destination and generate origin, okay, that generates trip, let's say, from one place to another. And then also the connection, because it works or it should work like a network. And so, for example, for integration is important. Then it should be like plausible and realistic scenarios that must be studied. And what you have to study is the typical factor you have to study at that point is not if it has to go on this street or another street. It's really okay, we have different families of type of transit, and then those have different characteristics that can vary, like in terms of average speed, peak capacity, but then cost. Normally, the higher the cost, the better you have capacity and average speed, but then you have a trade-off. So you have carefully to decide not only capital cost, but also operation and management, including depreciation, so life cycle cost. Uh, then you have to test the scenarios in the traffic model. The traffic model tells you, like the response, for example, if I do this project with those characteristics, I will get so many new transit users. How many minutes people in average will save? How many more miles will be traveled by foot, bike, or transit, or less miles eventually? How many less miles will be traveled by car? All these numbers are something that I can factor in cost benefit analysis. Cost benefit analysis are very important because it's a way, it's one of the way, yeah? It's not the only way, but to weigh appropriately these costs and benefits. But it's not just financial cost and benefits, but it's broadly talking social and economic cost and benefits about okay spending for building this and for the operation, but also time lost is a cost, health spending is a cost, emission is a cost, and so on. So social and reducing health spending is a social benefit, for example. Then, for this is a very good example. Milan, they did a very good work thanks to the work of the Polytechnic that helped them. And so they really did, okay, do an economic cost benefit analysis and one specific for the municipalities' finances because they want like to be sustainable. And then we see the impact, not just on the plan that was devised, let's do some pre-screening and then like decide on a scenario and do the cost benefit on this scenario and then see the impact on the land. So creating a lot of this kind of very thorough analysis that is quite technical, that is published. You have the methodologies that is published, so people can argue and can say, okay, no, you have counted this and this is not okay. But you can also see the geographic distribution of benefits. And this is very important from an equity perspective. So really, I will go a bit faster. It's also important to have to budget in plans to make be very clear about capital and operation expenditures of the plan. They're used for cost benefit analysis, but they're also important for the public. And for example, it's not just this line. As you see here, they say, okay, having this, the tramway that will, the network that we're planning for this Bologna, for 3, 4, 5 minutes headway in the throughout the day. Okay, it will cost us 1 billion in investment, and over the year it will cost us 50, 60 million in operation cost, and so on. But also not just projects, but policies like fare integration, mobility hubs, and also other stuff that are more like intangible. Um, and this was part of an overall reform of the whole way mass transit projects are funded and delivered. Because it's the idea, okay, let's focus and find the good project to be funded. Okay, if you want to put money. So let's say the PUMs, like mobility plans, will like identify projects and actions and policies. And this is where the mode and service pattern and general alignment are decided. Then municipalities get funds from the national government for very quickly, and this is a good practice, like giving funds to do this first, like 30 or 50% design and business case that is done within this general technical and economic feasibility project. And this where final alignment and all the decisions, like the project will be like that, are taken. Then you go to the government that will fund you up to 100%, and projects are ranked based on several efficacy and efficiency criteria, so they can be ranked and money can be given. And then final design and environmental evaluation and final third-party approval arrive to the final design that correspond more or less to the 90% design in the US. And then you go to procurement and then service that is given either to the transit agency or the private operator. And this is important also that is not it's almost never the transit agency that is in charge of capital projects. It's always a political body like municipality or the metropolitan city. very important thing that I think it's important. It's not that it's a process that is done just by technicians in a closed room. It's something that is really uh, helped in some cases to foster a very constructive public engagement. For example, in Rome, the fact that they put a number of propositions, the municipality arrived with some. These are our own political proposition. Put your own proposition on on this kind of tables, and then the most voted one will be evaluated through this cost benefit analysis. This helped bring back on the plan something that at the time municipality was quite against, like continuing and finalizing the metro system because they were scared of the costs essentially. But it's a way like to also avoid exasperated hyperlocalism because you make engagement at the city level where all people can participate, not because okay I will have the line on my backyard, but I will be a user, a future user of the line. So it's not so localized, it's talking at the city level. So, and I will finish. So the $1 million question, I mean, I know if I have the answer, but for sure the answer is yes. It helped a lot switching to this new system and together with the new process because it prompted really a wave of new and better transit projects and better planning. There are still issues like everywhere, but um, they, especially together with the overall reform of the capital funding process and the perspective of financial commitment for the central government, this worked a lot as a kind of incentive to push municipalities to do good practices instead of and putting out also deterrents to do bad ones, like changing ever changing projects and so on. So it's really a kind of well balancing incentives and deterrents, but I don't say that everything is perfect at all. There is still a big issue about how do we fund operation, and this part of the reform is missed because of problem of inequity, in economic inequity between the different regions of Italy. But this helped a lot to make things way better. The way we plan and we deliver projects way better than it was 15 years ago. So thank you. Do people have